Yo, what is up everyone, welcome to the next video. In this video I've prepared one trade that each NBA team needs to make, in my humble opinion, and the video will be broken into 3 pieces, so it's not too long, so let's start with part 1. We are going to start with the Atlanta Hawks. And we're not gonna start off with a positive trade, because from what I see, Hawks need to trade Trae Young. They failed to build a competent team around him for 6 years now, and it doesn't look like they will anytime soon. Especially after the recent trade of Dejounte Murray, mostly centered around draft capital and future. If they want to rebuild, they should fully commit to that and let go of Trae Young while they can get a ton of value for him. My suggested trade would be this. Spurs receive Trae Young, Hawks receive Devin Vassell, Stephon Castle, and Hawks 25 first round pick. And that's a fairly even trade in my eyes. Trae Young lost a bit of value in the last year or two, and the return they would get is pretty solid. A 19-year-old promising point guard in Stephon Castle would be a perfect replacement for Trae Young if they decide to fully commit to the rebuild. They would also receive a young prospect in Devin Vassell, which would allow them to trade Bogdanovic, who's currently their starting shooting guard, and can still bring them some value back in a trade, and fill that spot with a young player. And the pick they would receive would be their own for next year, which is the perfect case scenario for them to tank and end up with a top pick. The Spurs, on the other hand, receive Trae Young, who's already a proven star in this league and would be a perfect fit next to Wemby. I think these two could become one of the best duos in the league, as they complement each other's games and would work well together. The recent acquisition of Chris Paul does not stand in the way at all, as he's already 39 years old and a backup role would work better for him. Next one is the Boston Celtics, and they are actually going to be a pretty quick one, because the Boston Celtics are actually the only team that I don't have a trade for, because I just don't think it is needed. They were the best team in the league last season and won a championship, so I think potentially messing up the chemistry would be unnecessary. I could draw a trade for a player almost out of rotation that would get them a second round pick, but I just simply don't want to bullshit you and give you a trade idea just for the sake of having one. Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are going into deep rebuild and should value draft capital and young players. They still have a few veterans on the team that are valuable enough to get them a solid return. And I know what you might be thinking, Ben Simmons is off the team, right? Well, not necessarily. While I do believe they should trade Ben, I don't think it's the right time. Simmons' value is at its all-time low, so it would make no sense to trade him now for a bag of chips. I would rather they give him a chance to show he finally can stay healthy and play solid basketball, and trade him at the deadline when his value is higher. And if he won't prove anything wrong and stay the same Ben Simmons we know, then, well, I guess you don't really lose anything because his trade value can't get any lower. I would also advise against trading Schroeder and Bojan Bogdanovic, as their salaries combine for about 30 million, so the Nets are better off keeping them around for a year until they leave in the offseason, which will clear about 30 million of their salary cap and give them more wiggle room in free agency. In the perfect world, by then they can trade away Ben Simmons around the deadline, which might be tough with his 40 million a year salary though. The trade that I would suggest, however, is this. Nets receive Jeff Green and 226 second round picks, and Rockets receive Dorian Finney-Smith. It's a small trade but helps both teams. Nets receive a player on his last year under contract, which they can let go in the next free agency, as well as 2 second round picks. Rockets trade away their 38-year-old veteran near the end of his career for a better veteran player at only 31 years of age that will help the young second unit. Charlotte Hornets. Now, I have to start off by telling you that this trade might be a complete miss, as I haven't been watching much of the Hornets games recently. It's going to be a small trade, as I like what they've done recently. Bringing in Josh Green and Grant Williams was a really good move, as well as drafting Micic. They already have a lot of young players with great potential, and I'm fairly certain they will make a considerable push for playoffs this year. The deal I drew out for them cannot be made until December 15th, and it is this one. Hornets receive Royce O'Neal, Suns receive Cody Martin, 25 second round pick and 27 second round pick. I like that from the Hornets perspective, as Royce is definitely an upgrade from Cody Martin and would fit well as the backup PF spot to help them have slightly higher chances at making the playoffs, mostly because I believe he could be a great mentor for the young players around him and he has some playoff experience already. For the Suns, the main reason would be the 2 second-round picks. Royce O'Neal won't really be an important piece to them, and they'll be fine with Cody Martin instead, but in their situation where they traded close to all of their future draft capital, acquiring 2 extra picks could very much tempt them into agreeing to that deal. Next are the Chicago Bulls. And before I even took notes and planned a trade for them, I already found myself feeling, well, discontent and uncomfortable. And that's because I want nothing more from the Bulls than to finally face the reality that this team, with its current core, is just simply not good enough to win a championship, no matter what pieces you put around your main guys. So they really need to throw in the towel and go into rebuild. We all know, however, that the Bulls organization has no intent whatsoever to go into rebuild, so instead of drawing out the trade that I would want them to make, I have to go in the realistic sort of direction, which is their unrealistic expectation that this team can win, and draw a trade that goes in the direction they want to and will go. Anyways, under these circumstances, my proposition would be to make this trade. Bulls receive Dorian Finney-Smith, Nets receive Javon Carter, Dalen Terry and the 25 second round pick. It's a small deal that could help the Bulls slightly, given that their bench mostly consists of young players and they don't really have anyone to run backup forward except of Jalen Smith, who they can't run at backup PF as they will leave no one to play backup center. So it seems to me like they could use a guy like Finney-Smith to fill that position as well as give the young second unit a veteran. The Nets are after young players and draft capital, so they receive a young player in Dalen Terry, who will be entering only his 3rd season in the league, as well as next year's 2nd round pick, and Javon Carter, who they could flip for another 2nd rounder. The next team is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers are a pretty well put together team, and I honestly wouldn't want to mess with their chemistry too much, so I prepared a rather small trade for them. I realized they could use a solid backup point guard, as I don't have much trust in Craig Porter Jr., and I'm assuming the Cavaliers don't as well. So here's the deal. The Cavaliers receive Reggie Jackson, and the 76ers receive Craig Porter Jr. And like I said, the trade is small, but having a solid veteran point guard on the bench could help the Cavaliers at least slightly, and I honestly wouldn't worry too much about giving away a young player as they prioritize winning now, and also because I'm not too high on Craig Porter. And when it comes to the 76ers, they don't really need Reggie Jackson, as they are already set with their point guard rotation, having Tyrese Maxey and Kyle Lowry. At least with this trade, they'd get a young player who could potentially develop into a solid player. Dallas Mavericks. I had a bit of trouble finding a trade for the Mavericks as they are already a very good team and a deep team at that, and that just made the finals and signed Klay Thompson as well. And while they don't necessarily need to make any trades, I thought they could use a solid backup point guard, so I created a trade for them and I'll show it right now. Just bear in mind that they won't be able to do it until November 1st. And this trade, Mavericks receive Trey Jones, and Spurs receive Spencer Dinwiddie, Dwight Powell and a 25 second round pick. In my eyes, the Mavericks would benefit greatly from that trade, as Trey Jones is a really underrated point guard who would fit the team perfectly and is an improvement from Spencer Dinwiddie. They don't need Dwight Powell as they already have a deep team. Spurs, on the other hand, don't need Trey Jones now that they signed Chris Paul and drafted the promising 19-year-old point guard in Stephen Castle, and they have PG and backup PG sorted. They'd receive a 2nd round pick for Trey Jones as well as 2 veterans who could be flipped for more 2nd rounders, essentially ending up being a Trey Jones for 3 or 4 2nd round picks. The next team are the Denver Nuggets. And after the loss of KCP, Nuggets are in a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Their starting shooting guard position at the moment would have to be occupied by the young, still inexperienced Christian Braun, which is not ideal for a team trying to win a championship. We all know that the Nuggets have been fond of a veteran 3&D player at that position in the past years. First it was Bruce Brown, then KCP. Problem is, there are really not many options in the current market for a solid 3&D shooting guard, especially given into consideration the rather small trade flexibility of the Nuggets. I did, however, find one trade that would benefit both teams, and this is the trade. Nuggets receive Josh Richardson, Heat receive Julian Strawther. So from the Nuggets perspective, it makes perfect sense. They aim to win a championship and need to fill out their starting shooting guard position with a guy that fits their way of building a team, being a veteran 3&D player. The loss of a young wing in that case is something they would have to live with, as their goal is to win now. Now from the Heat perspective, I realize it may be a bit of a reach. I do however think that this trade would benefit them. After signing Alec Burks, the Heat don't necessarily need Josh Richardson anymore, and Richardson is also on the last year of his deal and may leave them in the free agency next year. Julian Strawther is under contract for a few more years, in which they could develop him into a solid player. Detroit Pistons. I have to say at the very beginning that I may have either cooked something incredible here or completely missed. I'm not sure myself if I'm being honest, as it's a bit of a 2K trade. So Pistons recently acquired Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. And while they are really solid veteran players, I don't like having all three of them on the team, as they take a lot of minutes from the young players and slow their progression, which is not something you want on a rebuilding team. And they are also not good enough to move the needle and make them go from the worst team in the league to the playoffs, so the Pistons will just end up in the no man's zone. Keep in mind though that they have to wait until December 15th to make this deal, and it goes like this. Pistons receive Steven Adams, Amen Thompson, Aaron Holiday. Rockets receive Tim Hardaway Jr., Paul Reed and Malik Beasley, and a 28th first round pick. So Pistons have to commit to the rebuild and give young players as much time as possible on the court, and so in this trade they would be giving away two of their veterans and Paul Reed to acquire Amen Thompson. I think he should be the player they go after because his brother Ozar Thompson is on the team, and that would most likely result in a huge chemistry between them as well as a boost to morale. Amen is also a very talented player and they'd benefit greatly from having him on the team, and I know that this trade also has them trading away a young player in Paul Reed for Steven Adams, but I had to include them to make this trade work, and Paul Reed isn't really needed that much as they already have a much better young center in Jalen Duren, and the loss of a pick doesn't really hurt them given the benefit of this trade and the fact that they have a ton of future draft capital, and well, Aaron Holiday is just a salary filler in this deal by the way. And I believe that this trade would also benefit the Rockets greatly, as we know they are trying to make a playoff push and contend. I know it's nowhere near them having a chance at the championship, but it's a step in that direction, and having two really solid veterans in Tim Hardaway and Malik Beasley would help them a lot. Steven Adams is also coming from a season-long injury, so he is a bit of a risk factor, and in return they receive younger player in Paul Reed, who has played every game of the last season and played really well. They also receive a future first round pick, making their stock of draft capital larger. And the last team for today is the Golden State Warriors. So the Warriors are pretty cooked at the moment, and to make matters worse, their starting center will most likely be Draymond Green, which doesn't really look promising. They need an actual center on the team, but the center market isn't too big right now, so acquiring one is difficult. I have however found a trade that would benefit the Warriors and make them a slightly better team, at least on paper. In this trade, the Warriors receive DeAndre Ayton and Portland Trail Blazers receive Draymond Green, Gary Payton, Lindy Waters and a 28th first round pick. And I know it seems like quite a lot for DeAndre Ayton, and it is, because his value is pretty low right now, but given that the Warriors don't look to go out of competition just yet and want to give Curry a team to compete with, they don't really have much of a choice. We know that Ayton is up to some shenanigans on regular basis, however on paper he does seem like a good fit to the team. 3-point shots will be flying as always on the Warriors, and they could really use a center who can rebound the ball well and give them second chances. That should help them immensely. And as far as what they lose in this trade, it is time to part ways with Draymond Green anyways, and I realize the value that he brought to the Warriors dynasty throughout the years, but in the last couple of seasons all he does is pretty much actively hurt the team, either by running his teammates away from the organization, making stupid decisions, or in most cases getting himself thrown out of games and suspended for acts of aggression on the court. And now is as good a time to trade him as any, given the recent emergence of Jonathan Kuminga. Gary Payton and Lindy Waters have to be added to make the trade work financially, and the addition of the future first round pick is needed as the rebuilding Trailblazers would have no interest in a trade that brings them nothing but veterans. And as for the Trailblazers, this is the best case scenario to trade DeAndre Ayton. His value at the moment is most likely not enough to get a first round pick, and they not only get one in this deal, they also get some veterans that could be flipped for additional draft capital. That will be all for today. If you enjoyed the video, leave a comment, tell me what you think about the trades that I've prepared, whether you would make them or not, or maybe you have some different propositions. I'll be happy to read them and respond, and yeah.